you see me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the next edition of Chatting Up the Chick. Yes, Clackenham Palace, Population 2. If you include myself and my wife. But this week, yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have some duckies. So if I do disappear from the show, it's because I'm looking after the duckies. So, Phils, be prepared for a chick to disappear.
So it's a magic show as well.
Magic show as well, indeed. Right, this week we are continuing our chat from last week. The idea of deconstruction from the religious institution that we call Christianity in the Western world. We are brought to today's show by absolutely no one, because no one wants to sponsor us. But I'm drinking a nice cup of coffee. Normally I've got a beer or a cider, but I'm going for some coffee.
We could have used some sponsors for beer though.
That's good. Right, so last week we just a recap of what we did last week. We was talking about how we found ourselves into religion. Then we talked about the pinnacle moment when we started to realize that our journey in religion thus far was starting to falter, to the point where we decided, right, enough's enough. I can't legitimately, honestly still be part of this type of religion that I've found myself in for X amount of years. Is that a good enough summary?
Yeah. Still all right.
So we also skirted around certain things that could potentially be good talking points in the future, in terms of if anyone else is listening to this podcast and they're in the same position where, well, let's just say from my perspective, I know people that have, there's three types of people. There's the people that
Three types.
There's three types. There's your pink, your blue, and there's the types of people who are still part of the institutional church, and they kind of just grim and bear the whole charade that's going on without being honest to themselves. Then there's the people who, like you and I, who have left, but we're just really not sure where the journey's taking us. We're in that kind of in-between stage of like a deconstruction to reconstruction, even though that's a misnomer in itself, because I believe that life as its own entity is a journey where you're constantly going backwards and forwards anyway, trying to figure out. So, but then there's the third type of person that I've come across, is the type of people who leave the institutional church and they leave all types of religious understanding completely behind them. So they become full-on atheist, or become so disenfranchised they don't even want anything to do with God, Jesus, any kind of spirituality, religion.
Yeah. Actually, when you touch on that point, I encountered quite a lot of people that have very much that outtake on from their experiences of either Christianity or some sort of religion. And it's interesting to see their perspective, to hear them. And yeah, I mean, I personally don't all that agree, but I can agree with some of the points, right? But again, if you completely dismay all possibility that there is a God or any sort of spirituality, it kind of doesn't leave you in a place where you would be very content. At least maybe, I don't know. I think in a long-term sort of thing, you would just always be resentful that you associate yourself with a religion, where I personally don't feel resentful of associating myself with that. It's just been a learning curve.
Yeah. No, you touch on a good point actually, because it's like people who have this belief that they're always right, even when they've been wrong. So you have yeah. Sorry, my name's Dave.
Oh, Dave.
Yeah, these people that, and yeah, look, don't get me wrong, I've been in that boat, of course. I can humble myself and realize when I was being led by the ego rather than the spirit of humility. But they kind of changed their whole belief and then come to the new belief, and then the irony being that they 100% believe that they're right, which kind of negates
Right.
the whole, which kind of negates the whole idea of being wrong in the first place from their previous belief. But anyway, the problem being there is they've now shown more of their character, which overrides what their belief is anyway. So, like you were saying, there's people who leave the church and are so become so maladjusted, so uh, like almost vitriol, have some vitriol towards people that are still in the church, like calling them dumb and following, sky fairies and whatever. There's I've heard it all. It must be. I don't want to speak for those people because I'm not there. I'm not that kind of. I'm not in that position where I don't not believe in a divine being. Now my picture of that divine being has changed completely to what it was even 2 years ago. But I do have a friend actually. We're talking about this, and I don't want to say that my friend is like the characteristics that we've just been talking about. But I have a friend who was part of the church, and you might know her actually. I won't say the name out, just in case she doesn't want to come on. She, he, it. Bringing it down the percentage of people figuring out who it is. But that person left the church and went full on atheist. And a lot of it is based upon, I believe, and this person would have to speak for themselves, but it seems like a lot of it comes from a place of hurt and feeling like they'd been lied to and told to believe certain things. And because that now doesn't line up with their reality, they've now responded in a very, I won't say aggressive way, but certainly in a passive aggressive way.
Yeah.
Where they're now saying, all right, well, you prove to me that there's a God, and then I'll believe there's a God. And then kind of coming up with this long sheet of paper showing all the problems they have with Christianity and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's purely because, there's individuals in an organization that miss the point of religion to begin with, I think. Or maybe not religion, but more the point of the teachings of the Bible, essentially, where instead of, coming in an aggressive manner towards someone or an individual and, trying all sorts of manipulations or maybe other methods to, converse people into maintain belief, it only, has one effect, which is basically push people away, and in fact push people towards believing the opposite of that. So.
Now, I do remember saying last week that.
Hang on, mate. Hang on. 1 second. 1 second.
Are you gonna fart? It is. Oh, Blaze. Oh, your dog's barking. Oi, duckies. Calm down. Yeah, no, calm down. Don't want to hear your chirping. Don't want to hear you chirping. We were saying last week that I thought it would be good to kind of take this conversation in a positive direction, talking about that us leaving the church institution shouldn't just be a solely negative principle. like there was positive things about institutionalized church and the environment and the community that we found ourselves in. But that's what I said last week. I'm just putting a caveat in there because I want to zone in on something you just said like a couple of minutes ago. You talked about manipulation.
Oh, okay.
How your experience was of one of manipulation in some senses. Is that right?
I wouldn't say I mean, sure, there is.
Or your just like your understanding. Can you unpack what you meant by that?
Well, manipulation in itself, by definition, is not really what I'm meaning as such. I mean, I
Deceive.
find that people in the church believe something without really checking it themselves, and then are wholeheartedly convinced on it. And so it's kind of lying to yourself and then lying to others, or because we don't really, check ourselves and check what we're doing and check what we're believing and check how the impact of what we're believing, has on the people around us. The results are what they are. I think the Bible actually teaches that is that it's you shall know you should know them by their fruits, and the fruits are, I mean, if you're pushing people away, what does that say about you, right? Regardless if you're keeping the Sabbath or don't swear or this, that, the other, like if your fruits are representative of you, not treating people with love and the base human respect they deserve. Far out. It's like you've missed the point almost.
Yeah, and this is how for non-religious people, like the religious talk between people who understand the concept of religion from a institutionalized concept is that it's very dynamic in the sense that what you're saying is true, but then people, their way of the way they try and kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like they use a type of tactic to reinforce. That's the word I'm looking for. They try to reinforce their already known belief. So, for instance, you're talking about, pushing people away, and if your fruits of your understanding of religion push people away, it's a negative thing from the perspective of what you're coming from. But then people will say, oh yeah, but Jesus pushed people away. Even at one point, most of his disciples left him, and he even turned around to his 12 close disciples and said, well, aren't you going to go as well? And they said, oh well, where else have we got to go? And so people use that as a way of rebutting what you've just said. And on paper, it sounds
right,
justifiable.
Yeah.
Because you're taking one. This is why religion could be so dynamic. Is that a lot of the times we take the religious community takes so much out of context. They don't actually think about what they're saying and what the
implications are.
Yeah, what the implications are at the end of it. Because yes, you could use that as a rebuttal against you, but at the same time, it doesn't fit in with the context that you're coming from.
Correct.
And that's what used to frustrate me about being in the church, is that you couldn't have those discussions around really nuancing certain conversations because people were so ingrained with, no, this is the way it is. And if you try to bring anything else to the table and it doesn't fit with my paradigm, then I'm not interested. And that was one of the reasons. That was probably I'll have to unpack this now and tell you the example. I was in a service with a small group of people. There's probably like a group of about 20 people. And I really enjoyed it because they were different to most of the Seventh-day Adventist churches around Christchurch. So they would get together, a very small group, and it wouldn't be the typical kind of running through a service and having a running sheet and stuff like that. It was very relaxed, very organic. One person would be the MC, and then they would kind of have it's almost like a glorified Bible study, so to speak.
Mm.
And so I used to enjoy that more because it was more relaxed and more free flowing, and people could interact and stuff like that. And I remember they were having a discussion, and they were like, the whole basis of the discussion was around how wrong the idea of human evolution is. And so, look, I'm not gonna start saying whether it's right or wrong, or you must believe this or must believe that. That wasn't the point of why I'm telling the story. The point of why I'm telling the story was they were very adamant that evolution was wrong, and their whole paradigm was based around that. It's destroying people's faith and stuff like that. And yeah, it would destroy people's faith if you have a certain presupposition, a certain starting point that dictates that evolution cannot happen. Of course, it's going to be a problem, because as soon as someone comes up against that idea and it rubs up against the whole idea of that the world's only 6,000 years old from the creationist kind of perspective, it's going to be an issue. But
Yeah.
I didn't want to just go along with the flow because everyone was just agreeing with each other. So I started asking some questions. I was like, all right, I wasn't playing the devil's advocate, but I wanted to start asking some difficult questions in the sense of making them think rather than just towing the party line, so to speak. Again, if you asked me what's right and what's wrong, I'll just say to you, yes. Like, because I don't think the answer is important. Like, to me, it doesn't matter. I don't care. But to these people, they were holding on to it so tightly. I wanted to kind of just get some new kind of thought process going through. Anyway, within 5 minutes, I was shot down. I was asked actually to be quiet, to stop asking questions. All right, and I just sat there and I was like, really?
Wow.
I'm like, really? Is this is the mentality we're at, where someone asks some tough questions and your response is to shoot them down? That's it? And that was it. From that point on, it was just a slow slope where I was just like, I just don't want to be a part of this. Like, I'm getting absolutely nothing out of this, like nothing. And so yeah, that was a pinnacle time for me. Pinnacle time.
See, I kind of can relate to that a lot, because when I first started going to church and I was just genuinely trying to understand, I was asking all these questions without really any thought that would be upsetting to some people, because end of the day you would think that, asking what what is the set of beliefs, and how does it all work, and how does does that, it should be something that people should be open with, and accept that, hey, yeah, we don't know this, oh yeah, I don't know that, it's fine, but this is how I look at it. Or maybe I'm not the right person to talk to, but we Christians just take the stance of like, no, you're wrong, it doesn't matter, we have no logical reason. And then no wonder why we look so stupid, in the rest of the world. Everybody that is a normal, rational person that thinks for themselves can look at that response and be like, okay, well, these guys are clearly not looking to, they're really running just some sort of club rather than an actual belief that, might have some legitimacy in it, essentially. But yeah,
I think it's also important to say especially again if someone's listening, hello.
Hello,
if someone's listening, and they're
whoever you
really
are.
yeah, hello again. If they're really struggling with trying to understand the whole idea of the concept of faith, I think a lot of people have the wrong concept of faith, and that causes cognitive dissonance within them to the point where they just lose any kind of um, grasping onto what they held dear before. Because
Yeah.
I don't want these podcasts to be a way of making people kind of be like, well, these
Religion shit.
yeah, these guys just knocking on religion, and so why should I even bother to even
Yeah.
be a part of it? I don't want that to be the case. I'm personally just speaking from my
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
But the one thing I want to say about faith is the concept of faith has been wrongly identified, and I'll tell you why. Because when you speak to people who have been inside the institutionalized church, and I want to specifically say that because I don't want to say it about all Christians. I'm just talking about people within this institutionalized church who have a position of power. And you say to them, what is the opposite of faith? Most of the time, they will respond unfaith, no faith, or little faith. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Whereas the opposite of faith is not that, it's actually certainty.
Yep.
And because a lot of people don't see it like that, it's a game changer when you start thinking about how you read your sacred scripture, how you understand who God is. It changes everything because now all of a sudden you realize, well, actually, faith is based upon something that is not geared around being certain of everything that you know or know to be true.
Mm.
The time when you can actually put your hands up and go, I don't know. I don't know because I
And
literally
you know
don't know.
what? It's freaking okay.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, once people start saying, "Oh, your faith is weak" or whatever, if you say you don't know, well, then that tells me that they've got the wrong understanding of what faith is.
And when did the faith become a leveling system?
Yeah.
You know,
That's
like
true.
this just it's like when you go into a church and there's a pastor there or some sort of priest, and there's almost a sense of like spiritual, mastery for them, where everybody puts this sort of sense of, they have this great faith and you're not. But frick, man, such absolute garbage.
Yeah, I think that's a hang up of westernized Christianity.
Yeah, it's just
It's just putting people on pedestals.
I found myself saying this early, quite quite early on, is that I noticed that if you have, even if you had the truth and you thought you had the truth, if you can't deliver the truth in a form that you know um, somebody else can accept it, or in a way that is kind of, then you've missed a point essentially.
Mm.
So you're frozen, by the way.
That's good. I've been sitting on ice for 35 minutes. So
Yeah.
before we wrap up this episode,
Yep.
I'd like to tease. I'd like to tease you, and I'd like
Ooh.
to tease the one listener.
Ooh.
I'd like to tease them with the subject that we could move into next week to kind of give some flow to these episodes.
Hmm.
So my question for you is, and you don't have to answer it with a massive tangent or rant, but just a kind of a baseline
Rant? No, put a rant in.
Well, you can do a rant if you want, but just a baseline rant, just to give people a little bit of a tease going into next week, so we can unpack it more. And the question is, what's your relationship with the Bible at this point in time? That's it. Tease them. Tease them.
Well, as a good Christian say, it would be very, common, and
So,
keep it close to my heart. And I don't know. Yeah, no, you can definitely think about that. It's a good question.
But from just off the top of your head, what's your relationship with it right now? Because I'll tell you honestly, my relationship, there is no relationship.
Yeah. Well, you can't have a relationship with a book, first of all.
No, yeah, I know you donut. I'm talking about.
I know where you're going. I know where you. I know where you.
It's not like I'm expecting you to be in bed with it.
Well. No, my relationship is more so. I think for me, I wouldn't say I've had enough of the Bible, and I certainly don't know enough for all there is. But I think for me personally, I've learned what I needed for the time being, in order to actually go and just learn how to utilize the teachings. Looking at it and reading it, sure, not really fussed about it either way. It's a book. It's all it is, and it's there to tell you a story about what happened several thousand years ago, and how and try to utilize that in a way that kind of works in this century, essentially.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I'll be asking you some intense questions next week about the typical understanding of the Bible through the Christian lens. So, like inerrancy, are there any? Is the Bible truly a God-written piece of art? What's your understanding of how the Bible was put together? All of these kind of questions, just to unpack that kind of understanding of there's different camps with how people interact with the Bible.
Yeah.
So, people who see the Bible as the beacon, the Holy Grail, and in some circumstances even bigger than Jesus. There's nothing that the Bible can do that would harm their children, type thing. Like it's the be all and end all. And then obviously you have other people who see it as transcripts, as like you were saying, as like a story of talking about certain people at a certain time doing certain things, and attributing those things to a divine being or whatever. Like it's just like a historical document, so to speak. So yeah, I'll be asking you questions about, because I know from my own personal experience, first time coming into the church, I was taught that the Bible was inerrant,
and you were zealous in your belief.
That it's a true word of God, and there is no errors in the Bible, and it flows in a way that is true to itself. Yeah, so the Bible can't contradict itself or whatever.
Right.
Did you have that similar kind?
I did. Yeah, I had exactly the same thing, and I was taught all those things. And to be honest, as I was studying, that statement didn't hold really. I know that the mindset, the kind of the perspective that the church kind of was teaching to kind of help you see that, but it still wouldn't be clear. And I don't think it's clear to the elders or to the people that have been there 30 years or 40 years. It's like, and I'm sure it's never meant to be clear, but you still meant to make sense of things. And if there is, I wouldn't say contradicting, but if there is, teachings in there that, don't align exactly how you picture it, at some point you got to say, okay, well, maybe there is more to this than our current perspective.
Yeah, or your current understanding, certainly.
Current understanding.
Yeah, because I know I was spending time as an apologetic, if anything, more than a scholar. So I never wanted to be an apologetic. I didn't want to. Yeah, so like constantly coming up with reasons for why, like people would come up with certain discrediting of the Bible. They'll say, oh well, there's an obvious contradiction here, and then my understanding was to defend the Bible and come up with excuses for why there was a perceivable contradiction, even if it was just saying, well, it may look like a contradiction, but actually this is the state of affairs, and then starting to pass certain Greek and saying, well, the Greek actually describes it like this, and the English was a terrible interpretation. And then people kind of look at me going, man, you have to jump through hoops and swings here just to kind of justify it to yourself.
And that's what it became like, right? Is that when you dwell deeper into the study of that, you found that far out how much translation and all this kind of stuff, and then how the Bible was constructed, and you just think this can't be like all that right.
Yeah, and a lot of the arguments I've seen are, which I'm like, yeah, that's a great argument, but it means nothing to me because I don't see the Bible the way most Christians do. But their biggest argument that people who try to discredit the Bible will say, well, if God is a perfect God, then why has he created a book that's got so many issues? where it's not clear to the point where you can just make a quick justification and say, yeah, this is the reason why. And look, you can argue that it's due to translations, or you can argue it's due to people's understanding. Like there's
I want to ask the question more so in a way, why did God, or Jesus, when he was here, have to speak in parables?
Yeah, well,
right. Why couldn't it just be like, do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that?
Yeah.
Why beat around the bush?
There you go. What a great way to end this podcast, because we're not going to give an answer this week. But tune in next week to Chatting Up the Chick, where we will dissect why these fucking parables.
Right.
Thank you very much, Phils. It's been a pleasure. Once again, I'm going to leave this 37 minutes of heaven behind me.
38.
And go back into the real world and probably find myself on my bed in the next 5 minutes with a tear in my eye, thinking, what's the point? Sayonara. Tschüss!
Sayonara, man.
Tschüss.